Today, I have a happy news to announce. I got pregnant after having an affair with Reno.
It was my sister-in-law who confessed that she got pregnant by having an affair with my husband. Unbelievable. She said that so casually. As for my husband, he even had the nerve to say,
I don't need an infertile woman. With my brother, let's have a double divorce.
"Oh, really? If you two want to be a couple so badly, go right ahead. In fact, why not be stuck with each other forever?" Thinking that, I smirked. My name is Sarah. I'm 40 years old. Just the other day, I got 7 mosquito bites in one afternoon because I let my guard down while weeding the yard, thinking mosquitoes wouldn't be a problem anymore. It's so hard to get rid of bite marks as you age. Damn mosquitoes. The next one that comes near me is getting squashed by my right hand. If only I could deal with annoying people as easily as I do with mosquitoes. In my life, I've encountered 2 people who were so difficult that I doubted I could handle them. This story took place about 6 years ago. I was living with my husband, Ryan, and his parents in their family home. We all got along well, and I didn't face any of the typical evil mother-in-law scenarios you often hear about. However, there was one thing that weighed heavily on me. It was having kids. A few years into our marriage, I was diagnosed with cancer. While I recovered physically, I lost the ability to have children. Ryan and I had once dreamed,
What names we'd give our future kids?
so I couldn't help but feel guilty.
Don't worry about having kids. As long as you're healthy and here with me, that's enough.
Hearing those kind words only made me wish I could have given Ryan a child of his own. I even vowed to dedicate my life to that wonderful man. One day, Ryan's brother, Kevin, and his wife announced they were moving back to our area after years of living in a rural town due to work. They said they planned to eventually buy a house, but for the time being, they couldn't afford moving expenses, and renting an apartment seemed wasteful. So, they wanted to live with my in-laws until they saved enough money. Fortunately, the family home, inherited from Ryan's wealthy grandmother, was large and had plenty of rooms. We figured having 6 people living together wouldn't be a big deal, so we welcomed my brother-in-law and his wife into the house. However, at that time, I kept a secret from everyone. To be honest, I'm not fond of my brother-in-law's wife, that is, my sister-in-law Michelle. We'd crossed paths many times during holidays, and I always felt we didn't get along. Michelle had a habit of making comments like,
What's it like not being able to have kids? You're not really a woman anymore, huh? Hilarious.
whenever Ryan or his parents weren't around. Why didn't I tell him or his parents about this? You might laugh, but part of me believed that she might be right, and I often questioned whether I was still a woman. After my illness, I might have already been feeling pretty down on myself. Yet, thinking of having someone hit me such a sore spot and then me running to tell my husband or in-laws, saying,
Can you believe how awful she is?
my fragile pride just couldn't take that. All I could do was put on a brave face against Michelle and pretend her words didn't bother me. Therefore, even though I wasn't thrilled about living together, I couldn't exactly protest as a younger daughter-in-law. Once Ryan's parents had approved it, I would just follow suit.
It's fine. I'm strong. I'll just laugh off her nasty comments.
Or so I thought. After we started living together, Michelle's snarky remarks and jabs became constant. If I muttered something like,
It's hot today.
she'd snap.
Then cut your long hair at once.
One time, she peered at me while I was in the kitchen.
For someone whose body doesn't work as a woman, you don't even grow facial hair. What are you, male, female, or something in between?
She said so, laughing and walking off. Tolerating her occasional presence during holidays was one thing, but dealing with her daily wore me down. While I was quietly putting up with everything, Kevin, my brother-in-law, picked up on how I was being treated and said to Michelle,
Why do you always have to speak like that?
Despite that, it didn't help at all. Living together revealed that Kevin and Michelle's relationship was strained. Whenever he tried to address something, she would brush him off with,
Yeah, right, whatever.
or provoke him with comments like,
Being the good little boy again, huh?
She never seriously engaged with him. Furthermore, she would even go so far as to say,
This is annoying. I'm bored.
and walk off in the middle of the conversation. Once, I overheard them arguing. Kevin shouted,
If I bother you so much, why don't we just get divorced?
Michelle burst into tears and cried.
How can you even say that?
I'd assumed Michelle didn't love Kevin, but maybe I was wrong. From the outside, it's hard to understand someone else's marriage. At least, that's what I was thinking at the time.
Reno, your way of using emoji is so outdated. You're younger than me, huh? It's hilarious.
Mimi, your texts are so full of abbreviations I can't even read them. What does K mean?
Of course it means okay. Wait, you seriously didn't know?
Nope, not at all.
This casual banter came from the living room. My sister-in-law Michelle and my husband Ryan were laughing while looking at their phones. Rhino? Mimi? I couldn't believe my ears. Apparently, not only were they using nicknames for each other, but they were also exchanging texts, despite living in the same house. Sensing something off, I couldn't stop myself from stepping into the room, blurting out,
Wow, looks like you guys are having fun, huh?
The moment I spoke, Ryan turned toward me with a panicked look and stammered,
Saw Sarah.
Since Michelle is Mimi, does that make me Cesara? No, that couldn't be. Ryan was clearly flustered and at a loss. Michelle, unfazed, waved a hand at me and said,
Oh, hey, Sarah, thanks for keeping the house running.
Her hand gesture could have easily been interpreted as a dismissive go away. She didn't have a flashy appearance. She had blonde hair in a neat bob and looked like the picture of wholesomeness at first glance. Despite that, the moment she opened her mouth, her shallowness became glaringly obvious. I don't know much about her past, but I'd bet she was a troublemaker back in her school days. Her immature behavior at her age was another reason I had always had a hard time with her.
Since Sarah's here, I'll leave you two to chat.
She said breezily before walking out. Didn't the thought of the three of us talking together even occur to her? Ryan didn't bother to stop her. Well, since we saw each other every day in this house, we could talk whenever we wanted. Still, something felt off, so I asked Ryan,
What were you and Michelle talking about?
Oh, just saying how great last night's dinner was. That was your cooking, right? You're such a good cook.
Ryan replied. He clearly didn't realize I'd overheard their conversation. I never imagined he'd lie to my face so casually.
Didn't you just call Michelle Mimi earlier? Since when have you two been so close?
I bet you misheard. Well, we were talking about the Kirin beer. You probably mixed it up because of that.
Those names didn't even sound remotely alike. The excuse was so flimsy, but Ryan looked smug, like he thought he'd successfully covered his tracks. Those two guys, they were way too suspicious. How long had this been going on? My husband and sister-in-law, what a ridiculous combination. I never saw it coming. I'd let my guard down completely. I decided to keep a close eye on the two of them. However, before I could put my plan into action, an incident occurred just 1 week later.
I have a big announcement. Drum roll, please.
Michelle suddenly stood up at the dinner table, grabbing everyone's attention except Ryan's. Her next words were far beyond anything I could have imagined.
I got pregnant from having an affair with Reno.
She smiled and added,
Before I could have a child with Kevin, I ended up getting pregnant with Reno's baby. So, Kevin, you'll need to divorce me too.
I felt the blood drain from my face as I stared at her. Ryan smiled and chimed in.
It's amazing to have my own child. I've always wanted one, but held back for so long.
Everyone at the table was stunned into silence by how utterly shameless they were.
Sarah, I'm ordering you to leave. You're infertile. It's time for a double divorce.
Ryan turned to me, pointing dramatically like he'd caught a criminal. My hands and feet went cold as I muttered the only word I could manage.
Unbelievable.
Kevin was visibly shaking, clenching his fists on the table, and said,
You too. You are the worst.
Michelle was unfazed and replied,
Well, what else can we do? We can't pretend this baby doesn't exist. Reno and I getting married is the best solution, don't you think?
Ryan looked thrilled and said,
I'll finally get to hold my own child. I'm glad I didn't give up. Mom, Dad, you'll finally have your first grandchild.
My mother-in-law stood up from her chair, visibly pale, and staggered slightly. My father-in-law quickly caught her, and she said to the rest of us,
Oh my. This is just too much. Really. I can't believe this is happening.
Far from rejoicing, she looked devastated, but Ryan just joked.
Mom, are you so thrilled that you're about to pass out?
No, the only thing worth celebrating was his utter idiocy. Supported by my father-in-law, my mother-in-law staggered toward the cabinet behind the dining table and pulled out a thick envelope.
Take a look at this.
She said so, pulling out photos and documents from the envelope. The moment she laid them on the table, Michelle, who had initially looked confused, went pale and her face twisted in shock.
What is this?
She stammered. The photos showed Michelle walking out of what looked like a cafe, intimately hugging and kissing a man. As Michelle froze in panic, my mother-in-law began to explain.
Sorry to use such an old-school method, but ever since Michelle started living here, there's been a strange man lurking around the house at night.
According to her, the man would stand outside, staring toward Michelle's room. At first, my mother-in-law was on high alert, thinking he might be stalking Michelle. However, one evening, on her way from the doctor, my mother-in-law saw Michelle arm in arm with a man, walking together. Realizing that her son, Kevin, was being betrayed, my in-laws decided to hire a private investigator to look into Michelle's behavior.
At first, I thought it was just an affair with this man.
My mother-in-law hesitated, glancing at her husband for support. He stepped closer, silently encouraging her to continue. She seemed to make up her mind. She looked at him, gave him a firm nod, took a deep breath, and said this.
Michelle, are you involved in some kind of weird group?
It turns out that the cafe in the photos wasn't just a regular spot. It was a known meeting place for married people. Apparently, people would go there to meet new partners, sometimes even as couples, swapping and cheating openly. Outwardly, it looked like a simple cafe and only operated during the day, giving it an air of normalcy. The police were suspicious of the place, but hadn't been able to intervene since it maintained a front of legitimacy. It was at this cafe that Michelle met the strange man who'd been hanging around the house, and they became romantically involved. That wasn't all. According to testimony from regulars, she had been involved with at least 20 other men.
Michelle, let me ask you directly. If you're really pregnant, Will you agree to a DNA test?
Everyone was stunned into silence by this shocking revelation, except for my typically gentle in-laws, who were glaring at her with uncharacteristic intensity.
This is ridiculous. There's no need for a DNA test.
Michelle yelled. Kevin calmly replied.
It's not like we've been close for a while. The real issue is Ryan.
Caught off guard, Ryan stammered, repeating himself.
It's not my child? It's not mine?
Enough, Michelle. If it's really Ryan's child, then there's no reason to refuse the test.
My father-in-law said firmly. Michelle argued.
This is a violation of privacy.
When Ryan looked at her with lifeless eyes and asked,
Why are you so against it?
she crumbled, her knees giving out beneath her.
Because being doubted like this, it's unfair to the child.
If you take the test, I'll believe in the child, and in you as well, Mimi.
He said earnestly.
I've fallen for you, and I'm serious about us. Please don't betray me.
Oh, that's right. I'd almost forgotten. When we first started dating, Ryan had a tendency to be overly possessive, a heavy kind of love. Depending on how you look at it, it could even be considered suffocating. Back then, friends would warn me, isn't he too much? Maybe you should break it off. Yet, after seeing my mother struggle with my father's infidelity, I believed someone as devoted as Ryan wouldn't cheat. Well, I didn't expect that passion to fade during our marriage, though. Furthermore, Michelle happens to resemble Ryan's favorite pop idol from years ago. To him, this probably felt like fulfilling a lifelong dream of being with his ideal woman. That likely explains why his feelings for me had cooled over time. Thinking about how Michelle would likely endure his obsessive love made my spine tingle with dread. Right then, all that obsessive energy was laser-focused on her. Ryan stared at her with an intensity that was almost suffocating, his love and her betrayal mixing into a terrifying expression.
You're being too much. I can't handle someone taking it this seriously. I want to love lots of people, not be tied down to just one.
What do you mean? Does that mean if we got married, you'd eventually leave me too?
You're trying to leave Sarah right now, aren't you? So it's the same thing. That's just how love works.
I think you need to understand the depth of my love, Mimi.
What are you talking about?
Ryan said so with a chilling smile, and Michelle's face turned pale at his words.
Sorry to interrupt your drama, but can we just finalize our divorce now?
Only Michelle tried to protest and shouted.
Wait, hold on. No remarriage. Time out.
But no one listened. Thus, as Ryan and Michelle wanted, we went through with the double divorce. Kevin identified the man Michelle had been having an affair with. As for me, I demanded a fair division of assets from Ryan. Then, here's the critical part. Michelle eventually admitted,
I don't know who the father is.
and tried to escape Ryan's obsessive love, but, being the kind and generous person I am, I gently suggested to Ryan,
Even if the baby isn't biologically yours, if it's from someone you love, you can still love it as your own.
To my surprise, he nodded and said,
You know, that might actually be true.
They say love is blind, but in his case, it was downright gullible. Ryan declared he'd marry Michelle no matter what, while she insisted she'd do anything to escape him. Their conflict grew so intense that my in-laws kicked both of them out of the house, leaving them nowhere to go and wandering for a time. That's when I stepped in again. I told Ryan,
You know, when someone says they don't like something, it often means the opposite. If you're worried about cheating, just keep a close watch on her. Mold her into your ideal wife. Now that you're going to be a father, you need to take charge.
completely buying into my advice, Ryan rented a place for Michelle and forced her to move in, or rather, they began happily cohabiting. Rumors flew that she needed permission to go out and could only move around the house to use the bathroom, but surely that part was exaggerated. I'm not completely sure, but he could have really made her do it. Michelle eventually gave birth to a child, though no one knew who the father was. Soon after, a man came forward, claiming he wanted to take custody of the baby. He was one of the men who had been involved with Michelle. Apparently, he and his wife didn't have any children. He wanted to take responsibility now that he could be the biological father of the child. After some convincing, Michelle reluctantly agreed to a DNA test, which confirmed the very man was the father. Perhaps the child had somehow summoned their real parent. The man took custody of the baby, and through the grapevine, I heard the child was living a happy life. That brought us all some peace. No child deserves to be unhappy, no matter who their parents are. Meanwhile, with the baby gone, Ryan's obsession with Michelle only grew. Supposedly, she wasn't allowed to go out unless he was with her. How terrifying. Neighbors frequently spotted them on dates, and I saw them once too. Michelle's eyes were always vacant and lifeless. She'd once been so vibrant and well-kept, but under Ryan's controlling care, she was unrecognizable, with her hair thin and damaged, her skin rough and dull. Yet he was delighted, saying,
I'm glad Mimi's only mine now. I want her to stay like this, unnoticed by anyone else.
"Well, isn't that just wonderful? A happy ending for this whirlwind of a family, assuming Michelle counts as happy, of course. Ryan will probably never win Michelle's love, but he'll keep clinging to her. As for Michelle, she will likely never escape him. For someone who fancied herself a hopeless romantic, Michelle probably never saw Ryan's obsessive love coming. Kevin and I often laugh about how their betrayal led them to such a comical zombie marriage. By the way, I'm still in touch with Kevin, and my in-laws too. That's because I opened a cafe near their home. Kevin and my in-laws are regulars. I did consider moving to another state entirely, but my own family lives nearby, and factoring in living costs, property prices, and my connections here, staying felt like the better option. Sure, I still hear rumors about Ryan and Michelle or catch glimpses of them, but it doesn't bother me anymore. If anything, it's become a good story to laugh about with Kevin and the others. They're genuinely great people. Even though we're not family anymore, I hope to continue getting along with them as friends, despite the age difference. Kevin, who's still single like me, joked.
Maybe I'll open a rival cafe next door.
I laughed and said,
Please, don't even joke about that.
I'm pretty sure he was kidding. Life at the cafe is lively and fun. Every day, I share laughs and stories with my customers. I might technically be solo, but my clients really feel like family to me. Once, when I caught a cold, one of them even brought homemade fresh orange juice up to my second-floor apartment. Meanwhile, my real mom had just sent me a text saying, "You're tough. Just sleep it off," which was far from a get-well message. That homemade orange juice refreshed my heart and body like nothing else. I don't dream of turning my cafe into some famous spot featured on TV. I just want to keep running a cozy place where I can connect with each customer. Oh no! I've been rambling and completely forgot to order more coffee beans. Time to snap back to reality and get to work.